They laughed at me across the table. Not loudly, not cruelly, just the kind of laughter that slips between polished silverware and expensive wine. "Yes," Devin said in Spanish, glancing toward his family. "Lucia Granger." Then came the phrase I'll never forget. "Linda, pero tonta." Pretty, but dumb. They thought I didn't understand, because I was the blonde American girlfriend sitting quietly at their mahogany dining table, surrounded by fine china and sharper smiles. But what they didn't know, what they never imagined, was that I spoke fluent Spanish. Every insult, every smirk, every whispered dig. I collected them like glass shards, and I waited. Because sometimes silence isn't weakness. Sometimes it's the sharpest weapon in the room. Before Devin Reyes, I trusted my instincts. I believed I could read people, spot red flags, sense the shift in tone, feel the change in energy. But with him, I was blind, willingly. We met on a rainy Tuesday at Harlan's, a little bookstore cafe tucked between campus and the city. I was buried in a stack of notes, prepping for a linguistics seminar. Every table was full. I wasn't expecting company. Then I heard his voice, smooth, slightly accented, unapologetically confident. "Excuse me, would you mind if I sit here? Seems I'm out of luck." I looked up, and there he was, brown eyes that held stillness, hair tousled just enough to look effortless, and a smile that felt like a secret. "Sure," I said, moving my books. "Help yourself." He sat down, set his coffee gently on the table, and extended his hand. "Devin," he said. "Lucia," I replied, smiling back. He glanced at my open notebook. "Cross-cultural communications?" I nodded. "Grad program at Northbridge." His brow lifted. "Impressive. You're learning how the world talks to itself." The way he said it made me feel seen. He told me he worked in asset management, but his heart, it belonged to literature. Bolaño, Allende, Garcia Marquez. We spoke for 2 hours. I didn't even finish my coffee. He moved between cultures like he was born to both. Colombian roots, raised in the States, fluent in nuance. When he asked for my number, I gave it to him without hesitation. And just like that, I started falling. "You're different," Devin said one night, as we walked along the river after dinner. His fingers were wrapped around mine. The breeze was soft, and his voice carried a kind of weight I mistook for sincerity. "Most American girls I date are predictable," he said, "but you have depth." I should have paid attention to that sentence, to the way he said American girls, like they were a category, and I was the exception, like I was a test. But I didn't. I just smiled and held his hand tighter. Devin had the kind of charm that made you feel chosen. He was handsome, cultured, ambitious. When he spoke Spanish on calls with his family, I would listen quietly, pretending I couldn't understand. "You should learn Spanish," he'd tease, then add, "or maybe don't. It's cute when you don't understand." I'd laugh. I never mentioned the semester I spent in Seville, or the advanced conversation classes, or how I still practice fluently every single week. It hadn't seemed necessary until it did. "Mi amor, you're beautiful enough," he'd say, brushing my hair aside. "As long as you smile, no one cares what you're saying." There were moments I felt it, the sting behind the compliments, little jabs, dressed in warmth. "You're so American sometimes," he'd laugh when I offered to split the check. "I love how you wear what you want, even if no one else would." And somehow, I'd thank him for those words, as if I was lucky to be with someone who noticed everything I did, just to twist it into a subtle insult. I didn't see it then, But now, I know, he wasn't admiring me. He was measuring me. The first person who saw through him was Zoe. We'd been best friends since undergrad, the kind of friend who didn't sugarcoat things. She knew how I thought, how I rationalized, and how I sometimes loved with blinders on. One night, over wine and takeout in my apartment, she finally said it. "Are you sure about this guy?" Her legs were tucked under her. She wasn't accusing, just asking. I was already defensive. "What do you mean?" "I've seen him with you," she said, "and I've seen him when he thinks no one's watching. It's like he plays a role." I rolled my eyes. "He's just private. He acts different around his family." She sipped her wine and leaned in. "Exactly. And that doesn't worry you? Because how someone acts around their family usually tells you who they really are." I wanted to disagree. I wanted to tell her she was overthinking it. Instead, I said, "His family's important to him. He just wants the timing to be right." "Lucia," she said softly, 6 months is timing enough." She wasn't being mean. She was being honest. But I laughed it off. "You don't know him like I do." What she didn't know, what I didn't want to know, was that she was right. Devin didn't want to protect me from his family. He wanted to protect their opinion of him. The invitation came on a Sunday morning. We were tangled in my sheets, sunlight slipping between the blinds. Devin leaned over, kissed my shoulder, and said, "You should meet my family. Big dinner next weekend. My mom's been dying to meet the girl who stole my heart." I blinked, suddenly wide awake. "You told them about me?" "Of course," he said, but something flickered in his eyes, something too quick to name. "They want to meet the American girl I can't stop talking about." I smiled, nerves buzzing beneath my skin. "That's great. I'd love to meet them." He returned the smile, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. "Just be yourself," he said, then added, "Well, maybe a more conservative version of yourself." I laughed, thinking it was a joke. It wasn't. "All week," he reminded me, "just smile and be polite. My mom is traditional. Mila, my sister, is protective. Don't take it personally." The more he repeated it, the more it felt less like an invitation and more like a setup. By Thursday, I was spiraling. I tore through my closet. Everything felt too short, too bright, too me. Eventually, I chose a navy blue dress. Modest, safe. The kind of dress you wear when you're walking into someone else's world and hoping not to offend it. I even practiced Spanish phrases in the mirror, though I didn't need to. I knew the grammar. I knew the slang. I knew more than I let on. I researched Colombian customs until my eyes blurred. "You're overthinking this," Zoe said on the phone. "I just want them to like me," I whispered. But deep down, I already knew they wouldn't. And worse, I knew Devin wasn't going to stop them. Saturday evening arrived like a slow breath before a plunge. The air was warm, the sky was soft, but my stomach was tight with something I didn't have a name for yet. Devin pulled up in his sleek black Audi. When I opened the door, he gave me that practiced smile. "You look beautiful," he said, kissing my cheek. "Very appropriate." The words stung more than I let on. The drive was quiet. The city gave way to manicured hedges and high gates. Soon we were winding through hills lined with oak trees and private signs. Then we turned onto a long, cobbled driveway. At the end of it sat their house. Not a home, a statement, stucco walls, a tile roof. Spotless windows that reflected the last light of day. Everything about it whispered money, history, and expectations. Before we could even reach the steps, the front door opened. His mother appeared, tall, elegant, polished to perfection. A silk blouse, diamond studs, hair pinned in a flawless chignon. Her smile was wide, but her eyes didn't move. "Lucia," she said, pulling me into a hug that smelled like perfume and judgment. "We've heard so much about you." Behind her stood his father, broad-shouldered, quiet, unreadable. And beside him, Mila, his sister, beautiful, cold, already scanning me for flaws. "It's lovely to meet you," I said, steadying my voice. "Thank you for having me." His father nodded. "Devin speaks highly of you." It sounded like a formality, not a compliment. Inside, everything gleamed. Marble floors, tall ceilings, family photos in ornate frames, not a pillow out of place. Devin showed me around like a realtor. "Here's the study. Here's the sunroom. Here's where we host real guests." He didn't say that last part, but I felt it. And the way his mother's smile stiffened when I complimented a painting. That's when I felt the first real chill. This wasn't a dinner. It was a test. And I already knew they didn't plan on letting me pass. The dining room looked like it had never known warmth. Long mahogany table, crystal glasses, china that looked too delicate to touch. A chandelier sparkled overhead like a spotlight, too bright, too watching. A woman in uniform adjusted the final placements as Devin's mother gestured to my seat. "Sit here, next to Devin, directly across from Mila." I smoothed my dress and sat, my smile steady, my posture perfect. But my heart already knew. This wasn't hospitality. It was choreography. As soon as we were seated, Spanish flowed around me like I wasn't there. Devin slipped into it easily, laughing with Mila, nodding to his father. I listened. Every word. "Vino Americano," Devin said, handing his mother the wine we brought. She examined the label with thin lips. "Ah, Americano," she replied, like it left a bitter taste in her mouth. I kept my smile and turned to his father. "Gracias por invitarme a su casa," I said. "Thank you for inviting me to your home." A beat, then a flicker of surprise. His mother recovered first. "De nada," she said, but her eyes slid to Mila. The first course arrived. A pale green soup, beautiful, fragrant. "La sopa es deliciosa," I offered gently. Mila se inclinó hacia Devon y murmuró, "Parece una barata de Instagram." She looks like a cheap Instagram girl. I didn't blink. I lifted my spoon with grace. Devin chuckled, not the warm laugh he used with me. No, this one was meaner, smaller, real. "Linda, per tonta." Pretty, but dumb. His mother smirked. His father stayed silent. I twisted the cloth napkin in my lap until my knuckles ached. They thought I didn't understand. They thought I was smiling because I was clueless. But I was smiling because I was counting. The soup bowls were cleared. Next came fish. Delicate, plated like art. I complimented it too. Even as the knot in my stomach tightened with every passing word. I didn't need the food. I needed focus. Because now I wasn't just enduring this dinner. I was studying it. The way Mila wrinkled her nose at my laugh. The way Devin's mother glanced at my dress like it offended the furniture. "Su risa es molesta," Mila susurró. Her laugh is annoying. "Se viste como camarera gringa," his mother added. She dresses like an American waitress. "No tiene profundidad." She has no depth. Each insult was a pinprick, soft enough to miss if you weren't listening. But I was. I smiled. I nodded. I took small beats of every dish. They thought I was dazed, that I was flattered just to be in their presence. They had no idea I was building something, stone by stone, insult by insult. She's very blonde, isn't she? Devon's father finally said in English, staring directly at me. Devon patted my hand and replied in Spanish. No es tan vacía como parece. She's not as empty as she looks. More laughter. I took a slow sip of wine. They didn't see my hand shaking. They didn't hear the quiet fury under my breath. Then came the final blow, spoken casually, like the weather. ¿Es ella la indicada? Is she the one? Devon smiled and shook his head. Es buena relleno hasta que vuelva a Medellín. She's a good filler until I go back to Medellín. And just like that, I stopped pretending. I was done playing the part. Because when someone tells you what they think of you, believe them. The conversation drifted on, like nothing had happened. Devon's mother switched back to English as dessert was served, a perfect little flan with espresso in dainty porcelain cups. So, Lucia, she said, stirring her coffee, Devon tells us you're in graduate school? I smiled. Yes, I'm getting my master's in communications. How practical, she replied, her tone soft but sharp. And how did you two meet? I told the story. How he asked to share a table at a bookstore cafe. How we talked for hours. She nodded, but her eyes were already on her son. Such a romantic, she said. Don't you think, darling? Devon's father gave a grunt. Devon squeezed my shoulder. Lucia doesn't need romance, he said. She's very accommodating. The double meaning hung in the air, like perfume gone sour. Mila smirked. His mother took another sip of coffee. And I smiled wider than ever, because I had a plan now. I wasn't going to cry. I wasn't going to yell. I was going to let them finish their perfect little dinner. Let them keep laughing. Let them think they had won. And then I would speak. The main course was served next. Beef so tender it practically melted, surrounded by tiny roasted vegetables lined up like soldiers. I chewed slowly. I nodded politely, and I listened. Devon tells us you grew up in Vermont, his father said. Yes, I replied. In Burlington. My dad teaches environmental science at the university. His mouth twitched into a polite smile. Ah, academia. Very idealistic. Devon added. Dad used to be a professor, too. Before I realized idealism doesn't buy houses like this, his father said, gesturing with his wine glass. I returned the smile. Did you enjoy teaching? He blinked, surprised by the question. Very much, he admitted, but practicality wins. It was the first genuine moment I'd seen from him all evening, but even that faded quickly. Would you like more wine, Lucia? His mother asked, her voice as smooth as the table linen. No, thank you, I said. Everything's been so delicious. I want to savor it. She gave a small nod and whispered to her husband, Sabe cuándo parar. Sorprendente para una americana. She knows when to stop. Surprising for an American. I pretended not to hear, but my smile curled just slightly at the edges. Lucia's studying cross-cultural communication, Devon said suddenly, his tone too proud, too forced. She's fascinated by how people from different cultures interact. His father turned to me. Is that so? And what have you learned? I set down my fork, met his eyes, and said calmly that people often say one thing to your face and something very different when they think you can't understand them. Silence. Devon's hand twitched under the table. His mother's smile didn't quite recover, and Mila sat up straighter in her chair. The storm had started. They didn't speak right away. Just a few beats of stillness, too long to be casual. Then Devon's mother gave a tight smile. "How very insightful," she said. Her voice was smooth, but her eyes were searching. "Devon," she added quickly, "did you tell Lucia about the summer house in New York?" The conversation shifted, just like that, like a magician sweeping the table before anyone could see the trick. But it was too late. The unease had already settled in the room, and they were trying so hard to pretend they hadn't heard what they just heard. Devon cleared his throat and began describing their vacation home. But he was different now. He chose his words more carefully. He spoke more English. He watched me. They all did. And I watched them right back. Every glance between Devon and Mila. The way his mother's voice lost its shine. The way his father's eyes flicked to me like he was reevaluating a business deal. This wasn't about dessert anymore. This wasn't about manners or wine or making a good impression. This was about control. And they had just realized they didn't have all of it. As dessert was served, I studied Devon like I was seeing him for the first time. Because I was. The way he deferred to his father. The way he watched his mother's reactions like a schoolboy seeking approval. The edge of competition in every word exchanged with Mila. He wasn't the confident, cultured man I thought I knew. He was performing. And I had been his favorite prop. "So, Lucia," his mother asked sweetly as I took a bite of flan, "how long have you two been seeing each other?" 6 months, I said. She nodded slowly. "Too long," she muttered under her breath, still smiling. "And is it serious?" she asked. Devon tensed beside me. "Mama, por favor." "It's a simple question," she said, switching back to English. "A mother likes to know these things." I placed my spoon down gently. "I think that's something Devon and I are still figuring out," I said, calm as glass. His father nodded. "Smart girl. No need to rush these things, especially when she's not the right one." I took a sip of water, cool, steady, and exactly what I needed to swallow the fury rising in my throat. Because this wasn't just rejection. This was a room full of people, laughing while they carved me down in a language they thought I couldn't understand. But I did. Every word. And now, they were about to find that out. The flan was sweet, soft, perfectly made, and I barely tasted it. I watched them, each one, Mila's smirk, Devon's nervous smile, his mother's quiet arrogance, his father's clinical detachment. They thought the evening was winding down. They thought they'd gotten away with it, that I was still sitting at their table, unaware, unbothered, uncomprehending. That's when Mila leaned forward. "How long did you say you've been with my brother?" she asked in English, her tone clipped. 6 months, I said just as lightly. "Demasiado tiempo," she muttered to Devon. "Too long." I didn't react, not with my face, but I made note of the look that Devon gave her, like she'd gone a little too far, a little too loud. Between dessert and coffee, he leaned close, his breath warm on my ear. "You doing okay?" he whispered, syrupy sweet. I turned and met his eyes. "This has been eye-opening." He smiled, misreading me again. His hand found my knee under the table, a gesture that once felt affectionate. Now it felt like ownership. His mother began discussing some charity gala. I let her speak, but I wasn't listening to her anymore. I was listening to the voice in my head, the one that had been quiet for too long, and it was saying, "Now." The maid came around to collect the dessert plates. As she reached for mine, I looked up, right at Devin's father, and I spoke softly, clearly, with perfect pronunciation. Gracias por la cena. Todo estuvo exquisito. Thank you for the dinner. Everything was exquisite. The room froze. Devin's father paused, coffee cup hovering halfway to his mouth. Devin turned slowly, his smile draining. Mila's lips parted, just slightly, and his mother's hand stilled on her saucer. For a long, delicate moment, no one said a word. Then, "Pardon?" Devin's father asked. I blinked innocently. I was just thanking you for dinner. Devin let out a nervous laugh, the kind of laugh that cracks at the edges. She's picked up a few phrases from me, he said to his family in Spanish. Cute, right? His mother nodded too quickly. Yes, very quaint. But his father didn't look convinced. He was staring at me differently now, like I had just turned over a card they didn't know I was holding. The conversation resumed. But it had changed. There was tension now, caution, suspicion. Devin kept glancing at me, his confidence slipping. And I let it happen, because for the first time all night, I was speaking their language. His mother, desperate to regain control, changed the subject. Tell Lucia about the beach house in Cartagena, she said with forced cheer. Devin nodded, picking up the cue. He launched into a description. Sunlight on tiled roofs, mango trees in the courtyard, family memories wrapped in luxury. But he was using more English now, watching his words, watching me. It sounds beautiful, I said when he finished. I've always wanted to see Colombia. His mother's smile twitched. Oh, Devin hasn't mentioned taking you? I tilted my head. Number he hasn't. Mila jumped in, her voice too loud. Probably because Americans only care about the beaches. They don't understand the real Colombia. She said it in Spanish. I didn't flinch, didn't blink, didn't even sip my coffee. I just sat there, letting it land, letting them think they were still safe. Devin's father leaned in. What do you plan to do with your degree, Lucia? His tone had changed, curious, but condescending. Cross-cultural communications, I replied smoothly. So much gets lost between languages. But what I've found, I let the pause settle, was that people rarely speak as freely when they know they're being understood. The table went quiet again. No clang of silverware, no shifting in seats, just stillness. Devin cleared his throat. Maybe we should head out. Lucia has an early class tomorrow. I didn't, but I nodded. It's been such an interesting evening. And I meant it. Just not the way they thought. The car was quiet on the way back. Devin tapped the steering wheel with his thumb, a nervous rhythm, the first real crack in his polished exterior. He finally spoke. They liked you. I watched the trees blur past my window. Did they? I said softly, because I got a different impression. He glanced at me, frowning. What do you mean? I didn't answer right away. I just stared at the streetlights flashing across the windshield, one by one, illuminating his face, then fading. Just that people aren't always what they seem, I said. He gave a hollow laugh. You're overthinking it, Lucia. Everything's fine. I nodded, letting him believe that, for now. Because this wasn't the moment, not yet. I needed solid ground, my own space. No leather seats, no polished smiles, no one to protect. But the confrontation? It was coming. The truth had already started unraveling. He just didn't know it yet. When we reached my building, Devin parked and turned to me. "Want to come up for coffee?" I asked, my voice calm. Relief spread across his face like sunlight. "Yeah, I'd love that." Inside, everything felt smaller somehow. The bookshelf, the familiar couch, the quiet hum of safety. He sank into the cushions like nothing had changed. Like we were still us. I turned on the kettle and leaned against the counter, watching him scroll his phone. A message pinged. He smiled. "Your sister?" I asked. "Yeah," he said, still typing. "She wants to know if you survived the Inquisition." "And what did you tell her?" He set his phone down. "That you were perfect. The perfect American girlfriend." I walked over and sat across from him, knees nearly touching. My voice was gentle when I asked, "Devin, what does linda pero tonta mean?" His face changed. No more smile, no more ease, just silence. I tilted my head. "Or Releno, hasta que vuelva a Medellín." That one was interesting. He stared at me, frozen. "Lucia, or una barata de Instagram." I let each word hang, soft but sharp. He sat up straight, eyes wide. "Wait, you speak Spanish?" I smiled. "Fluently, since I was 16. It really helped tonight." He stood, running a hand through his hair. "Why didn't you tell me?" I stood too. "Why didn't you tell me I was just temporary?" He opened his mouth, but nothing came out. Because suddenly he wasn't the one leading the conversation. He stepped toward me. "It wasn't like that," he said quickly. "It was just family teasing. You don't understand." I looked him in the eye. "Devin, I sat there for 3 hours while you and your family dissected me, like I was something you ordered off a menu." His face flushed. "You're overreacting. You're twisting this." I shook my head. "Number, I'm translating it accurately." He laughed once, short, defensive. "Come on, Lucia. My parents are tough, but they didn't mean harm. I was just trying to make the night go smoothly." "By letting them mock me?" I asked. "By laughing along?" His voice dropped. "You don't understand the pressure I'm under." I crossed my arms. "Number, I understand perfectly. You want their approval more than you want to be decent. You let them decide how much of me was acceptable. You let them shrink me." "That's not true." "It is." I didn't yell. I didn't need to. "You don't love me, Devin. You love what I look like sitting next to you. You love that I fit into a box with a bow on top. Until I started speaking your language." He slumped onto the couch, head in his hands. "I made a mistake." "You made a choice." I walked to the door and opened it. "We're done." His eyes widened. "Lucia, wait. Just like that?" I nodded. "No more pretending? No more smiling while I'm being dismantled in a language you didn't think I could hear?" He moved toward the door, but I stood firm. "You're fluent in lies, Devin, but I don't translate those anymore." He stood there for a moment, like he didn't know what to do without control. "You're breaking up with me?" he asked quietly. "After everything?" I looked at him. "You broke this, Devin. Not tonight. A long time ago." He didn't move, didn't speak. So I closed the door and let the silence wrap around me like peace. My legs almost gave out. I leaned against the door, letting out a breath I'd been holding for months. The kettle was still whistling in the kitchen. It had boiled over, just like me. In the days that followed, he flooded my phone. Texts, voicemails, flowers at my door. Some messages were apologetic. "You misunderstood. It was just banter." Then came the desperate ones. "I miss you. Please let me explain." And finally, the angry ones. "You owe me a conversation." But I didn't. I owed him nothing. I blocked his number. Not out of spite, but out of clarity. Because I wasn't just angry, I was done. With the pretending, with the shrinking, with the translation of my worth into something small enough to be palatable. A few mornings later, I met Zoe at our favorite cafe. The one with mismatched chairs and books stacked against the windows. She was already there, 2 lattes waiting. As I sat down, she looked me over and said bluntly, "You look like hell." I smiled. "Thanks. I feel worse." I told her everything. The dinner, the comments, the moment I answered them in their own language. She listened, eyes wide, didn't interrupt once. When I finished, she reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "I'm so proud of you." I shook my head. "It took me too long." "No," she said softly. "It took exactly as long as you needed to find your voice again." That night, I went home and opened my journal. I wrote down everything, not to relive it, but to remember, to keep a record of every red flag I rationalized, every comment I let slide, every time I'd made myself small to keep someone else comfortable. Because this time, I wasn't going to forget, and I wasn't going to let it happen again. 3 days later, a message popped up on Instagram from Mila. "I didn't know you understood. I'm sorry for laughing. What we did was cruel." I read it, but I didn't respond, because her message wasn't for me. It was for her own conscience. And I'd already forgiven myself enough to know I didn't owe her anything. A week later, I sat at my desk, staring at a blank document. The cursor blinked at me like it was daring me to speak. So I did. I wrote everything. The insults, the looks, the laughs I smiled through. I titled it, "Language and Love. What I Learned When My Boyfriend Didn't Know I Understood His Insults." I posted it anonymously, no agenda, no revenge, just truth, out in the world. By the next morning, it had gone viral. Thousands of people read it. Comments poured in. Messages from women and men who had lived through the same quiet betrayal. Some in Spanish, some in French, some in silence. One comment stayed with me. "Your story made me realize I have been letting someone do this to me for years. I left him this morning. Thank you, I didn't write it for attention. I wrote it to breathe again, to put my voice somewhere I couldn't be interrupted. But knowing it helped someone, that made every word worth it." Zoe and I celebrated with a trip. Not to Colombia, not to somewhere Devin had wanted to go, to Costa Rica, somewhere I had dreamed of, before I'd started making myself small. 10 days, no makeup, no schedule, just me, my best friend, and my language, finally mine again. I ordered food in Spanish. I chatted with locals. I bargained at markets. I laughed in conversations I didn't have to pretend through. And for the first time in a long time, I wasn't performing. I was just being. It was our last night in Costa Rica. Zoe and I were sitting at a beach cafe, watching the sky melt into orange and rose over the Pacific. The waves rolled in steady and slow, the kind of sound that quiets your heart. I was sipping a cold beer when a man approached our table. He had sun-streaked hair, a relaxed walk, and a calmness in his eyes that felt different. "Mind if I join you?" he asked, his English laced with an accent I couldn't quite place. "I'm Mateo. I own this place." Zoe nudged me under the table, eyes wide. I smiled. "Sure." He pulled up a chair, and we talked about books, about travel, about how he'd lived in Australia before coming back home, about the cafe he built with his bare hands. He asked what brought me here. "A celebration," I told him. "New job, new chapter, a new everything." And the chapter before, I hesitated, then said honestly, a relationship that wasn't what I thought it was. He nodded. No pity, just understanding. Later, as he walked me back to the hotel, I turned to him. Can I ask you something personal? Of course. Do you ever make fun of your date in a language she might not understand? He blinked, then laughed, a warm, honest sound. Only if I want to be slapped. Why would anyone do that? You'd be surprised, I said quietly. He stopped walking. Someone did that to you? I nodded. And you understood every word? Every single one. He whistled under his breath. I bet that didn't end well for him. I smiled softly. It ended exactly how it should have. We reached the hotel. Matteo pulled a napkin from his pocket, scribbled down a number. If you ever come back, he said, handing it to me, or if you just want to practice your Spanish. I took it. Our fingers brushed. It didn't feel like sparks. It felt like peace. Thank you, I said, for a lovely evening. Thank you, he replied, for sharing your story. Not everyone has the courage to walk away from something that dims their light. He walked off down the beach, disappearing into the dark. I stood there for a moment, not smiling for anyone, not shrinking, not translating, just standing in my own space, unapologetically. Back in my room, I stepped out onto the balcony. The ocean whispered below. The stars blinked in the clear sky. I thought about how far I'd come, not just geographically, emotionally, spiritually. I had reclaimed my voice, my confidence, my identity, because now I wasn't just fluent in Spanish. I was fluent in myself, in my worth, in my boundaries, in my silence when it mattered, and in my words when it didn't. And that was a language no one could take from me again. The morning we flew home, I checked my phone at the gate. A message from Matteo. Safe travels, Lucia. The cafe will be here when you're ready to return. Stay brave. I smiled, not because it was romantic, but because it was respectful, because it saw me, the whole me. And in that moment, I knew I didn't need a partner to feel complete. I just needed a voice that I wouldn't silence again. We boarded the plane, Zoe beside me, a new chapter ahead, not returning to who I was, but becoming who I had always been before I started dimming myself to fit in someone else's comfort. I was done translating my worth into smaller words, done confusing charm for character, done mistaking attention for affection. Because the truth is, no matter how many languages someone speaks, if they don't speak respect, they're not worth listening to. And if you've ever sat through a conversation that was meant to exclude you, if you've ever smiled through insults or played small to survive a room, I want you to know this. You don't have to wait for someone else to give you permission to speak. You already know the language that matters most, your own, so speak it. Even if your voice shakes, even if no one expects it, speak it with clarity, with dignity, with all the strength you've earned in silence. Because you are not the punchline in someone else's story. You are the author of your own. And when the time comes, say it all, fluently.